Hello, everybody, and I wanted to welcome everybody to who's listening to us today for a very, very exciting session that's going to be dealing with U.S. VC investments in the Israeli market, and also a discussion about all commercial and government and public aspects that are involved in those kind of activities. My name is Tomer, and I'm running the U.S. Israel desk at BDO. And I'm very, very pleased to host today two good friends of the firm. First of all, Mr. Danny Ayalon, who is a former Israeli ambassador to the United States and also a deputy minister foreign affairs to the Israeli government. Danny is also a co-founder and the chairman of Silver Road Capital, which is a boutique financial and business advisor firm. Second to present is Mr. Michael Lavin, who is a founder and managing partner of Germinate Ventures, which is a global venture capital fund that focuses on agricultural and food technology. So welcome, guys. Very nice to meet you and see you over here on this platform. Okay, so I have a very important question to start with, and I want to address it for both of our speakers, Michael and Danny. Danny, you're going to start with this. And I wanted to ask you from a business aspect, how do you perceive the current COVID-19 situation? And do you find any positive lights for businesses to cling to?
Okay, well, first of all, Tomer, thank you very much for this very beautiful initiative. Thank you, BDO, for doing this over global lines. I'm also very honored and very pleased to share this platform with my very good friend, Michael Lavin, from the president of Germinate, global VC. And straight to the question, I can tell you that from our point of view at Silver Road Capital, which, as you know, is a boutique investment banking specialized in this triangle of Israel, US, and also Europe, quite honestly, we at this point see opportunities more than risks. The corona at this point, it seems like it's tapering, and although some people expect maybe or brace for a second wave, I think most of the attention now is thrown into the geopolitics of things, and of course in the economy and the financial markets. And when it comes to the financial and economic markets, Israel and also the United States are very, very strong economies with a lot of resources. And if I talk about US-Israel economic relationships, we have to remember that Israel is the largest trading partner of the United States in the Middle East. We buy more American services and goods. And of course, the investment both ways go very well. Israel is a perpetual generator of startups in all kinds of verticals in the high-tech industry, which is very much coveted by US investors. And here at Silver Road, I can tell you that just in the last week or so, we have finished two major deals with American investors that come to invest right here in Israel.
Michael?
Thank you. And just also want to echo the sentiment from Danny. Thank you for having me on the call and inviting me to participate and contribute here. And it also is a great honor to be speaking with Danny on this platform. We see, just like Danny, a lot of opportunity, a lot of silver linings for VCs and startups alike. I'd like to make a general comment that there isn't always opportunity for everybody, and there are a number of folks around the world that are affected by this, and our prayers go out to them. And this is certainly an adjustment to everyone's work and life routines, and to say the least, an adjustment, right? So, but want to highlight some of the opportunities that this does present. I think that some of the challenges that this puts on startups and VCs who generally rely on quite a bit of person-to-person interaction, this exposes a lot of bottlenecks, whether it's in the sell cycle process, trying to sell to your customer, which in our case, we focus on food and ag tech investing. And so those customers are farmers in many cases, but maybe not farmers. Maybe there are other constituents in the value chain. But these are folks that are very much used to doing deals on a handshake. And so that's an opportunity that isn't really present in this time. And we have to adapt. And I think that in general, these sorts of crises, although there's none that are necessarily exactly like this, and they're all unique in their own ways, are a test for leadership and a test for being able to adapt to change. And those that adapt to change, be it VCs or startups, will come out of this a lot stronger, will come out of this and be rewarded most likely with great success. And so they're looking at past crises. There are actually companies that have been made by those crises. PayPal is a good example of one. There's a number of other software and digital technologies and marketplace technologies that have been, quote unquote, made by these crises, where basically you have everyone's attention in a single place on a single topic, and you're able to target them and help them adapt to the new status quo, which has lasting ramifications, and so it doesn't necessarily go away. That is an opportunity that we think is presenting itself here. We think that, in particular, our software companies have an opportunity to innovate on certain bottlenecks in that sell cycle process where there is person-to-person interaction generally, and remove that person-to-person interaction and somehow take that interaction and move it online and digitize it. And so in our space, food and agriculture technologies, this is a sector that is often recognized as one of the least digitized industries. And I think that this event is an accelerant to the digitization process of that sector. And then sectors that have been considered digitized to a large extent, I think a lot of folks are seeing that there's a lot more digitization that could take place to advance those sectors even further into the 21st century. And so I think that there is a lot of silver lining opportunity for startups, for VCs. Although my final comment, I'll say that there are a number of VCs that are on the sidelines and choosing to turn inward and focus on their portfolio companies, which I think is a smart strategy for many, particularly those who maybe don't have as close of a touch with their portfolio companies as we do. But we see a lot of opportunity. We're still investing. I think that there's opportunity for VCs to take advantage of step changes in valuation here in this market. We've had some lofty valuations for some time now, and I think that this this presents an opportunity for some correction among some opportunities that really deserve to be funded and could provide lucrative exit outcomes for the investors.
All right, that is great. Thank you so much for this. Quite a kick, open kick for everything that we're going to be discussing. I want to go back to Danny, and I want to ask you. We slightly touched this before, but I want to ask you, what do you think is the most powerful impact that this COVID-19 thing, era, age, how do you want to call it, has affected global investments, but specifically, I want you to focus on the investment line between the United States and Israel.
Well, I would say that what I see as the focus from now on is going to be on remote control, remote production, remote like telemedicine, whether it's working from home in the offices, automatic or artificial intelligence, all these things that Israel is very much strong about. And of course, when it comes to medical developments, and at the end of the day, when you talk about remote functioning, it's all about the software. And here, I think that there will be a great boost for Israeli high-tech and startups. Mostly here, they are software related companies. And of course, in biomed, in medicine, and everything that goes around it, that would be a great boost to all of this.
All right, that is great. Michael, let's drill down for a second. And when you're looking at investments, as of course, global investments, and what type of risk can you define when you're examining potential investments, specifically from the Israeli market? And what can you recommend to an Israeli entrepreneur to do today in order to kind of hide them or detach them or overcome those challenges? So when they face an international investor like Germany, for example, that would not be a burden for the entire process.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say the number one, well, there's maybe two main risks. One is that the security is overvalued. So the easiest lever to pull on is valuation, and to make adjustments to valuation to entice investors to invest. But getting strategic for a second, the other is it's really, it ties together to, will this technology translate overseas? Will the product market fit that has been proven out in Israel indeed be relevant in having adoption and success and traction in the U.S. market or the European market, if those are the core markets outside of Israel? That's a very central issue to investors, and I think that there are a number of maneuvers that can help show investors that you're making the moves to basically set up for that success, but your early success in Israel also has a place for success outside of Israel, in the larger core markets that are more global in nature. And so some maneuvers that entrepreneurs might consider at this time, and really in any time, is establishing a parent company outside of Israel. We've seen this with our portfolio company Fieldin. From the outset of our investment, they showed a strong desire to enter the bigger market of the US and even beyond that, and themselves by moving to California and setting up headquarters there. Plus, from a governance perspective, having a US parent company to invest in oftentimes can make those investors more comfortable. So that's one maneuver that I would think about, and it's just not just for the US, but for Europe. If that's your core market, then the same maneuver can work there and apply there. Other maneuvers are emphasizing traction in Israel and how your early traction overseas will generate at a faster clip than in Israel. So you basically learned in the lab in Israel, so to speak, but you perfected your strategy there, sort of an aim small, miss small strategy. But now you're ready for prime time, and you're going to flip that switch and really grow and accelerate in the bigger key markets where you can dominate quickly. And then the third is through partnerships. Having partnerships with blue chip customers or blue chip channel partners, or well-known other startups even that are respected in the core market. If you can secure some of those partnerships, that lends a lot of credibility to the company, the technology, and the founding team as well. And it just shows that all these strategies show that you're becoming more global in nature. It's not just a pitch, but you're already taking action, you're already taking steps, and I think that that's very venture backable. Otherwise, without those moves, it's a little bit difficult to trust someone and to really trust the story that it'll translate over, and that these steps will be taken in the near term.
All right, that is great. I got another question. I'm drilling deep inside for a second on the new opportunities that COVID-19 has poured into the market, probably put a lot of other opportunities or needs on the fence, waiting for the next timing to step into the market. So Danny, I want to ask you something. You know, from Silver Road Capital perspective, you guys are well adapted in the Israeli market. You meet with every technology player, character, company, operation that there is. So I want to ask you, this question is parted by two parts. First part of the question is, how do you think that the venture market has adapted to the global needs that have changed as a result of the COVID-19? And as a follow-on to that, I want you also to address to a global investor that's listening to this, why do you think that they should specifically focus on the Israeli market today out of any other place in the world, and specifically in this time with the big shadow of COVID-19 innovations?
Well, Tomer, so first of all, I think after the initial shock of the COVID-19 and the maybe a little bit late response by governments all over, things are going back now to really prowling and to really look for good opportunities. And VCs, whether here in Israel or in the United States, you know, like we have Michael and the Germinate, they are liquid, they are professional enough, and they are looking and seeking for opportunities now. Now, I will be remiss not to mention one area which I think is going to get maybe the greatest boost of this COVID-19, and that would be the fintech area, you know, digital banking, telebanking. And in that respect, we see, you know, from our perspective at Silver Road, we see cryptocurrencies are becoming more and more pervasive, more and more common, and actually moving from where they are now into really the main street. And I believe that, first of all, a global currency now is very much in need. A currency which is also peer-to-peer based and not just on governments and central banks, and that can be very easily operated, whether you buy or sell. One thing that we see, which I think is going to revolutionize the fintech and the cryptocurrency, is when the crypto will become real money, where you can use your cryptocurrency, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin, to buy on Amazon or to buy in your store everything that you want to do, and everything that can be done right from your couch in the living room. So this is, in a specific way, a direction that we see becoming very, very common, and or becoming very, very attractive, and very, very soon, maybe even this year, we will see major developments there.
All right, so you know, you said it, you kind of touched this for the Germinate niche of this question. So Michael, I want to toss it back to you, and the last part of it, you know, allow me to sell the Israeli market for a second. Why do you think global investors should focus on the Israeli market today?
It's a great question. I'm glad that you asked it. And like we've mentioned before, Germinate is a global investor, and so we're focused on a number of different geographies around the world. Particularly, these are geographies where there's a confluence of agricultural economy and unique stresses that are placed upon it, and multinational tech presence. And so we believe that that culmination, and particularly the stresses, create unique innovations that are really unique to those countries and their needs, but certainly transferable to global agriculture and global food. And we see the same exact thing with Israel. Israel has a long history of startup innovation in general, as a result of unique stresses placed upon it, whether it's warfare or not warfare related, and a scarcity of resources and such. It really is vast and far ranging. And so Israel has become, like Danny mentioned earlier, a perpetual innovator and a perpetual startup engine for the world. And we get about 20% of our deal flow from Israel, at least. Probably another 15% is other international opportunities. But Israel is a very significant geography for us. We find that there's a very significant agriculture and food economy there. It's very resource inefficient compared to some of these other countries that have plentiful arable land for agriculture, for raising crops and livestock, and et cetera. But Israel has had to develop innovation to fulfill the needs of the country and even the export markets. So we've actually in specific seen a lot of remote sensing, computer vision, and IoT technologies, big data platforms coming out of Israel for a variety of different farming applications, all of them very critical, all of them very much needed. And when we think about coronavirus and its impact on the global landscape in general, there is a need for remote technologies. And this is an area where Israel has some serious core competency in. And so we see that as being a transferable technology to other markets. And we're excited to invest in Israel, and we're excited to bring those technologies over here and everywhere else in the world. If I also say some of the opportunities for collaboration with outside startups, that being startups outside of Israel, Israeli startups might have more of a core competency in the back-end software architecture of some of these technology platforms, or the remote sensing piece, either it's through hardware innovation or something else. They might have that deep technical back-end figured out, but in a lot of cases, transferring that technology overseas is difficult without adaptation to the user interface and the front end experience. And so there are companies, and there's talent pools in the U.S. That could be very complementary to those technology platforms. And I would encourage Israeli startups to think about those partnership opportunities as they expand, and to think about locating and having either satellite presence in the U.S. or headquarters in the U.S. even, keeping R&D in Israel, which allows still access to grant funding from the state of Israel. But then you can really have both sides of that back end and front end architecture figured out, and that'll drive better adoption, better traction, etc.
So let's expand this for a second, Michael, because you started talking about the incentive, part of the incentives of Israeli companies to connect to the U.S. market. And I want to ask you a follow-on question, actually. Mm-hmm. If you can share with us, why do you think it's a great opportunity in today's market for an Israeli company to go through this passage, and a very, very, let's call it, serious struggle going overseas and connecting globally with so many risks on the way. But I want you not just to address it from a commercial perspective, mm-hmm. also from a government aspects, when it comes to any kind of financial aid or any kind of specific benefits or advantages that you can see in today's market that will encourage Israeli companies to go over, cross that bridge with more incentives than they usually have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think a lot of the usual incentives are still very relevant. Just looking at the U.S. and Europe, they're far bigger markets, so that alone is really enticing. So if entrepreneurs have ambition to be global companies and get valued as global companies and have an exit that is outsized and ties back to that global market opportunity, then I think it's important that they expand beyond Israel's borders. And I think there's a lot of commercial opportunity in the U.S. For Israeli technologies in general. We also think that being global expands the universe of exit opportunities, and also makes the opportunity more enticing for global investors, be it whether they're based in the U.S. or Europe. Many investors will actually only invest if they're sharing the risk with other local investors, other U.S. investors. It's just something that lends additional credibility to the investment profile, and they like to share risk with each other, and they like to be somewhat reachable for a handshake. And so I think that there's a lot of incentive to go overseas, just from the aforementioned factors, and that all makes the company more valuable. But I'd also say, in terms of government and policy, I would like to see more policy that accelerates the path for some of these innovations to get through regulatory, whether it's synthetic biology or, as Danny mentioned, some of the remote sensing opportunities that are maybe in healthcare or medical device oriented. The needs are greater than ever. And I think that any sort of policy that helps streamline their path to market would be very beneficial. And the US should be innovating on that policy so that they can bring over a lot of those technologies and they can get them into the market as quick as possible. My sense is that Israel is probably going to be quicker in that regard, as Israel usually is, and Israel usually recognizes the stresses early on and the opportunities early on. And so I think that, you know, I'm hopeful that Israel continues to be to really set the direction on the world stage for the US to follow in that regard.
All right, well, I have a lot to comment on that, but we'll leave it for next time, I guess. Danny, I want to go back to you and try to convince a US investor that hasn't laid their feet in the Israeli market yet. Try to tell him why it's better for them to expand and explore their opportunities in the Israeli market, mainly and relied on the government support that they can get as a foreign investor with all the perks and benefits that the public government has to offer over here.
Well, first of all, you know, Israel is the economy is very agile, especially in the high tech industry and services. I would say also that the Israeli government now has tried and is trying, continuing to make things much simpler for international investors or incoming investors in terms of less regulation. And in terms also of finances, also because of the COVID-19, the chief scientist of the government and also the innovation authority in Israel are gearing up, and they are going to infuse a lot of money to startups that would qualify. And I think this is going to be a very, very smart and quick process. Also in Israel, you have a very, very qualitative, very good labor force, whether it's a scientist, but not only that. If you come to Israel to do business, you need all the peripheral assistance in terms of professional advice, whether it's accounting and due diligence like BDO is offering, whether it's lawyering, whether it's anything that surrounds it, and also strategic thinking. You have all the capacity and you have all the relevant people and professionals right here. And also, I think because of the Israeli can-do mentality and the small physical geography, everything is here pretty much close, and the people know each other. The network is very much enormous, which makes things very, very, I mean, in terms of innovation, in terms of go to the market, I think that Israeli startups are getting the job done with probably half the time that they would in other places and with half the money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I have to summarize that for a second, because I think that, you know, we at BDO, and especially under my operation and at the US Israel desk, we see a lot of all kinds, pretty much. We talk to investors, we talk to startups, we support them. We sometimes we mitigate in processes and conversations. We definitely see great opportunities over here in the Israeli market. We definitely see great support from a government perspective. The Israeli government is highly, highly in favor of foreign investments. And they actually have a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunities that they offer to US investors, global investors, not just US, of course. And BDO is obviously right in the middle of the heart of business when it comes to support and provide a good advice on how to fulfill those. And this is why we understand that the opportunities are just laid out there, and you just need to make a decision, a strategic decision, sometimes very brave, bold, and especially in risky times like what we're facing today, that you just need to think about the day after tomorrow strategy, the way I'm calling it, and just say, you know what, this crisis is going to be over at some point. We just need to think about what we're going to do the day after. So with summarizing that, and I think that was an alarming discussion, and I thank you both for this. I want to open the mic for a second. My summary and what I'm taking from this conversation is that, and Michael, it's funny, you're the one that mentioned it before, is that the Israeli DNA has always been a DNA that was well adapting crisis times. And they're always very, very quick on their instincts to say, you know what, this situation is pretty lousy. What are we going to do today to get ourselves out of the mud as quickly as possible? So that kind of approach has helped the Israeli state to be built in a way that it exists until today, and probably will for a long time. But also, I think that we've seen along the years, from the 50s and 60s and 70s, through a lot of crises and a lot of very, very horrific situations that the Israeli government, Israeli state has faced, we've seen that the people pulled out everything that they have from their DNA and just got out of the situation with amazing solutions. And Michael, you touched that, and I agree. I think that this is why the Israeli offerings from the Israeli market is probably going to be very well sophisticated to deal with such a global crisis that we're all facing today. So that's what I'm taking from the conversation. Michael, do you want to summarize yours?
Yeah, I think we covered a breadth of topics here, but I would agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. I'd also add that another key piece of the Israeli mentality or DNA in innovating in crisis times is that they never looked at it, seemingly to me, never looked at it as a passing situation to get through, but something that if they didn't innovate on, would have longevity and would last. And so I think taking a lesson or a page from that book today, we should think about COVID, and that COVID's not going away, or that these sorts of pandemics are not necessarily going away. And we need to innovate as if the situation that we're in now is going to last. And we should adjust, that means we should adjust our budgets, but we should also adjust how we're working together and how we're doing business and how we're driving policy forward, that we need to innovate on all of those. And I think that the reality, sadly, is that actually these pandemics will start to return. You know, you look in, like, I think it was 2015, which was right before the FDA banned antibiotic use prophylactically in livestock raising. But back then, 80% of all antibiotics were consumed by livestock in agriculture, usually not for therapeutic reasons, but for growth promotion reasons. And that's driven a lot of this disease resistance that we now face. And in the future, I would expect that these sorts of pandemics, especially given the global nature of how the world operates today, it will become a lot more commonplace. It'll be like another act of God, natural disaster type event, kind of like hurricanes. It'll just come around rather seasonally. And so we need to be innovating now for that time period. And I think that Israel always has a long-term view on things. And so wholeheartedly agreed that we can expect a lot of innovation out of Israel that is needed by all of us around the world. So I'm very excited for that, very excited to be a part of it and on the cutting edge, and humbled to be working with the exceptional entrepreneurs, Israeli and US based and otherwise, that are really solving that future problem with a long-term view.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. Danny, what about your closure for today?
Well, I would say that the future is very good. I think it's good. Maybe there will be some initial problematic times globally, but I think the global economy will overcome all the challenges that we've had, and especially Israel. Israel came into this crisis with very, very strong fundamental. Israeli economy is very strong, so we've had enough reserves and cushions to absorb the initial shocks. And as high tech and startups is, so to speak, the bread and butter of Israeli economy, this is going to continue in full swing with great, I would say, cooperation from all the Israeli sectors, whether it's the government sectors, the financial sectors, and of course the high-tech and industrial sectors. So Israel is very much poised to continue with innovations in a full array of different high-tech fields. And you know, also, since the Israeli economy is mostly high-tech and virtual, that means we are not really affected by, let's say, closure of the skies, when you don't have aviation working, when you don't have maybe shipping working. All we do is we ship through the internet. And these things continue in full force, and the Israeli technology is inside, you know, like Intel inside. And by the way, Intel's bottom line, 80% of Intel's bottom line globally is derived by Israeli technology and Israeli innovation right here in Israel. So Israel, Intel is just a microcosmos, just one example of how Israel will continue to be a dominant force in the global economies in high tech. And we would welcome, of course, investors from all over. It has been working very well for us and also for the investors.
So, Danny, that was great. And Michael, again, I want to thank you for this amazing conversation. It was really, really enlightening for me to hear your perspective on this, especially from a VC that's highly, highly involved in the Israeli market, but still managed and operating from the US market. So you see the whole global scale, but you can definitely identify what we wanted to emphasize from the Israeli market. So Mr. Michael Lavin, Mr. Danny Ayalon, I want to thank you again for taking the time to join me today. And I wish all of us healthy time and very strong commercial uprise coming up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.